Hello everyone, hope you folks are doing good. Thank you for joining in today, and today we're going to talk about a problem which you would benefit from knowing more about, and this is irrespective of whether you are a data science aspirant, a practitioner or a leader, right? The million-dollar question: why do a majority of AI projects fail? Based on both personal learnings and work in the space, I have narrowed this down to 4 areas, and I'm going to give you pointers that you can take away both to yourselves and to your organizations. I am Ranjani. I lead a global advanced analytics and data sciences team whose charter is to solve business problems with data across both business analytics and data science for customer experience and success at VMware. My interests lie in driving business value and decision making with analytics, strategy and leadership. I'm quite passionate about bringing more women into STEM, specifically into analytics as such, right? And hence I'm super excited to be here as part of WIDS Kerala. All right, so without much further ado, let's get started with the slides. All right, so first of all, who is this for, and what will you take away at the end of these 25 odd minutes? Now, if you are an IC working in this space, individual contributor that is, or looking at breaking into data sciences, you can learn what is the type of work and role that you can play and how you can position yourself to become a linchpin, right? You will also learn what it takes to drive value with AI beyond model building. Now, if you happen to be a leader managing analysts and data scientists in this space, we look at what you need to enable for your AI talent to drive success and the most important questions that most leaders in this space face. How do you balance innovation and keeping your team motivated along with delivering business value, right? Okay, so let's start with this, right? This slide, I think it kind of speaks for itself. Gartner recently predicted that 80% of analytics insights will not deliver business outcomes. Now, I'm going to pause here. That's a huge number, right? Especially for a sector that is touted as the sexiest job of the 21st century by HBR. And there are many more metrics that reiterate this narrative, yeah? There was this really great report I recommend you guys check out as well. It was published by BCG and MIT Sloan School of Management. It is called Winning with AI. Now, it talks about the conundrum that companies seem to face around the hype that surrounds the field, right? Like you can see here, 9 out of 10 respondents, they agree that AI represents a business opportunity for the company. But only 7 out of 10 companies actually reported any impact based on the investments done so far. Now, why is this the case, right? There's this perception that, AI is thought of as alchemy run by wizards, and it doesn't necessarily have actual value. And this where's this gap coming in from? So there's this case study, this is a real life case study, which I've kind of included here. And it's a solid example of the gap that exists between business and data science. And one which is more common than you ideally would expect and imagine, especially if you're working on NLP related problems. Now, I do have all the links for further research in the reference sections if you want to check out later. Now, getting back to this case study, right? It talks about this company. What they did is they opted for a recommender system they could use by their customer service representatives. And it was supposed to suggest solutions to common customer issues. Yeah. Now, this project was supposed to be a huge cost saver in itself for the company. Now, it took the company a few months to realize that the agents weren't using it at all. And then it took some more to realize why, right? They realized then that it wasn't necessarily a problem with the algorithm, but the data on which the models were trained. So it was trained on an ideal set of technical descriptions versus what the customer actually entered. Now, apart from this, they also realized that there were like overlapping categories in the data, which wasn't taken into consideration when they were training the model. Now, what this highlights is that, and it's a key point, right, which some data scientists seem to miss, around design thinking and thinking of the technical problem from the perspective of the user while we are developing our models. So why do we do what we do, right? So with that context, let's get into the 4 key reasons why the AI projects fail. I've bucketed this into these areas, right? So to quote this famous title, let's start with why. Strategy, right? Is the AI strategy driven from the business problem, or is it actually an afterthought? Talent, how do we hire? Who do you hire, right? Leadership, are you enabling your talent to drive value? And I cannot stress on the significance of this enough, right? And finally, we look at lessons from Pixar on The Ugly Baby and the Beast, how you need to balance innovation with driving business value, and how critical this is, especially in AI/ML. All right. With that high-level overview, let's now consider each in more detail. All right. Starting with strategy, and I think this is such a deal breaker in deciding the success of your projects. Right? Why are we doing what we are doing? Now, BCG recently called out a research that highlighted the need to integrate the AI strategy with the business strategy. What does that mean? Are you starting with the business problem? Now, if you think about it, right, AI cannot exist in vacuum without business context, and something which we just saw in the case study we reviewed earlier, right? So related to that question around when does AI come into the picture? In case of a product where you eventually anticipate data generated, that can be used for analytics, are we actually ensuring that this is capturing and rendering data to drive capabilities, right? Are you actually thinking about it when you're designing the product, or, does it come up only after you figure out what platforms, once you finalize the platforms, you're just collecting, say, the telemetry data. So is it, if you're helping drive decisions with ML, is this driven top down as a priority from leadership, or it's more of a good to have, right? So where does it fit in? I think that's critical. And the other thing around AI is it is a team sport, right? To succeed, we need to build collaboratively, and this is people across teams. Most of the time when you work on problems, it involves multiple teams, right? Like the product management, the engineering teams, technical teams, the data scientist team. All of them need to come together to work on a solution. And like BCG highlighted, AI is less about technology and more about business transformation. For example, say you're building a recommender. Now that ideally needs to be integrated into, say, Salesforce. Now that requires a process change itself, right? Not just algorithms to be successful. So are you thinking about that also? And finally, again, how will this information be consumed, right? And I think the consumption of AI is relatively given lesser importance compared to production, which probably explains why 87% of models never even make it to production, right? Have we actually considered who are the users and how will they adopt this? Do we need an API? Do we need a visual application? How will this be consumed? And more importantly, what is the success outcome, right? For example, some edge case prediction problems. What is good enough, right, to be useful for the business, right? I think there's, again, like a drop in terms of where the value falls around your iteration. So defining that success metric is very critical. And this comes back to the point, right? Is my understanding of the outcome the same as the user's understanding? Now, this may be therefore a very relatable post, right? This is a dynamically changing environment and one that requires you to be comfortable with ambiguity. It is easy to get into scope creep if we are not diligent. And finally, it helps to temper our expectations on what an out-of-box solution can and cannot do. Yeah. All right. So with that, let's move on to another favorite part, another one of my favorite parts, right? How do you set up a high performance team? So Pixar's founder, Ed Catmull, was once asked this question, apparently, yeah? Is it important to have great people or great ideas? So he apparently said that if you give a good idea to a mediocre team, they will screw up, yeah? But if you give a mediocre idea to a brilliant team, they will either fix it or throw it away and come up with something better. I love that quote, right? So it is people is everything. Having the right set of folks can be a disruptive driver to any team. So how do we hire a team that delivers? First thing is to hire right? So if you're a builder, people don't care what kind of hammer or nails or wood or tools are used. They want a well-constructed house at the outcome of it, right? So it's pretty much same, even in analytics, right? The business stakeholder who uses it, they don't really care how you built it out as long as the result delivers. Doesn't matter to them whether you're using R or Python, right? What are the underlying layers? It doesn't matter at all. So that is the mindset, or at least awareness, which data scientists need to have. And I definitely believe in hiring for attitude and training for skills, right? So the second step again is to hire diverse, and can't stress this enough, right? I think data scientist in itself as a term is such an overloaded word. There are different types of roles, which I think it takes to make a team successful in data sciences. And this includes data engineers, business analysts, data scientists, etc., right? And you can kind of see the roles here and how they interact, right? Are you actually hiring a complementary skill set team? And most importantly, I think it's also important to have a data translator who can tell the story, right? And storytelling is such a critical role to play, especially when you're working with a large number of business stakeholders. And finally, hire smart, right? Job description for most roles is very, very generic. If you are the hiring manager, it would help to spend time to be more specific on what you actually need the profile to support. This would actually help weed out profiles which are irrelevant. Mediocrity in this space will definitely deem your team irrelevant as well. So do ensure that you hire folks who are smarter than yourself to increase the intellectual capital of the team. So there's this quote over here, right? And probably I don't have it here. I remember reading this by Cassie, who is the chief decision intelligence engineer at Google. She uses this analogy, right? Imagine you're hiring a chef to build an oven or an electrical engineer to bake bread for you. When it comes to machine learning, that's the kind of mistakes I see businesses making over and over. If you're opening a bakery, she says, it's a great idea to hire an experienced baker who's well versed in the nuances of making delicious bread and pastry. You'd also want an oven. Like, while the oven is a critical tool, I bet you wouldn't charge your top pastry chef with the task of knowing how to build that oven. So why is your company focused on the equivalent for machine learning, right? So I think that's such a great analogy. So are you in the business of baking, making bread or making ovens? So what is it that you want your resources to do? Yeah. All right. With that, let's move on to the next section, right? Leadership. Are you enabling your AI talent to drive value? And what does it mean to enable in itself, right? So let's start with data. Again, this could be very relatable, especially if you're working in the space. Data is such a double-edged sword, right? It is a prerequisite for us to build out analytics capabilities, but across most organizations, it's highly siloed. It's collected in multiple platforms. It exists in different data lakes. There are multiple owners. There are different formats. And again, it's present at different places with different privacy options and with no way of even being able to join one with another, right? I once remember coming across this post of how a customer location for Philadelphia was spelled out in like 100 plus different ways. And it isn't even funny, right, for the analyst who's pulling out this information. So before we even embark on a fancy new AI project, can we take a step back to consider the data question? Is the data cleaned, collected, and accessible in a consistent and reliable manner, right? And related to the first point, how do we enable a robust and reliable environment? Do we have access to the compute, right? Are there data engineering capabilities for building reusable pipelines? Is there infrastructure available across the end-to-end value chain from data capture to disseminating the results, right? And are we also building reusable intelligence? So, for example, we work on a lot of NLP problems which require a ton of pre-processing, right? Can this actually be standardized and streamlined so that we don't have to start from scratch each time? Yeah. And the third point here is to reiterate that ML is not magic, right? Garbage in, garbage out. I think we have at times tried out like best-in-class NLP algorithms, but still struggled because we didn't integrate the business context, right? The key, therefore, is to keep it simple and set clear expectations on what can and cannot be accomplished with the data and capabilities which is available. And one of the biggest opportunities for all of us today is to figure out how we can educate the business leaders across the organizations, right? So finally, cannot stress the significance of being able to communicate with business stakeholders. Again, having the leadership help connect the dots and drive the decisions from insights is crucial. And I have this really funny tweet here. Clean data is close to a myth, right? And this shows how that pristine data doesn't directly exist. And data prep is still a majority of the time taken by data scientists, right? And that explains why, when you do projects with like really clean data as part of, say, programs which you might be doing, like out of the MOOCs and online courses, it is way different from what a real life problem looks like, right? So if you do have a chance, do volunteer for like stretch assignments or being part of teams to shadow projects within your own organizations to actually understand how a real data science project works, right? It's way more complicated across end to end, right? From design to delivery. Okay. So with that, the final section of the presentation today, and it's one of my favorite analogies that applies across industries, more so within the space, right? It's called the ugly baby and the beast, or how do we balance innovation and drive business value? So we all know the very famous founder of Pixar, Steve Jobs, but we may not have heard of this co-founder, right, called Ed Catmull. So he apparently authored this brilliant book on how Pixar fosters creativity. It's called Creativity Inc., in case you want to pick it up. So among the many different frameworks which he proposes on how one can overcome the unseen forces that stand in the way of true inspiration is the story of the ugly baby and the beast, right? So he says early on, all of the movies we made sucked, right? Pixar films were not good at all at first. And our job, he says, is to make them go from suck to not suck, right? So he describes how companies often do not spend enough time nurturing and improving an initial idea and quickly produce something lacking because of the pressure to feed the hungry beast, right? Beast is in the business is basically like business as usual, right? Something which makes money and that has got to be fed. And that's a reality, right? You can't do away with it. You still need to run the business. But new ideas are fragile, right? They do not look good and they take protection and you cannot judge them at that point. You can see how well the team is working together, but you cannot judge the idea. So we have to go from that stage to somehow with the engagement with the beast. And that's a long process, but that's a normal thing, right? you cannot protect the baby forever. Sometimes you have to, let it out in the world as well. So I think the bottom line is there needs to be this balance, right? Between being innovative and creative and also be able to deliver value. So the idea is to allow data scientists to iterate, because you cannot, the first iteration of what you do is not going to be, beautiful, but you need to let them iterate, but at the same time also be able to drive business value with projects, right? Because if that doesn't happen, people are just going to lose hope in terms of what AI can deliver. So I think that's the key, right? How do we balance between the two, innovating and driving business value? And that's why I thought this was a great analogy that we, right? So with that, I will probably wrap up our session today. I once again thank WIDS Kerala for this opportunity, and I hope this has been useful to all of you. Feel free to reach out to me for any follow-up questions, either on LinkedIn or on my website listed here. Thank you again, and you have a great day. Thank you, everyone. Take care.